touch it, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, they're trying to run away from the legacy of Unite the Right, but they don't understand you can't just make, edgy comments on Twitter. Unite the Right was a historical event, and it's always going to frame white identity politics, so they got to stand their ground and fight it. We've got lawsuits and all kinds of things coming up, and we need those to be successful. Are we rolling?
We're rolling. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Go for it.
Yeah, my name is Jason Kessler. I'm a civil rights advocate. I've written for Daily Caller. I've written for VDare. I've written for Got News. I exposed the anti-white tweets of my local city councilor, Wes Bellamy, got him kicked off of the Virginia Board of Education, where he was one of only 9 people deciding what goes in little kids' textbooks. Then I went around the country. I covered a number of right-wing political movements, rallies, et cetera, and then I ended up organizing both the first and the second Unite the Right. So I'm from Charlottesville, and as everybody knows by now, it's a pretty liberal city. So I myself was a liberal, but I was an old school liberal. If you look at what the Democrat Party was back in the time of Bill Clinton, for instance, he was given a lot of the same speeches that Trump is now about illegal immigration and its effect on workers' wages and so forth.
All Americans, not only in the states most heavily affected, but in every place in this country, are rightly disturbed by the large numbers of illegal aliens entering our country. The jobs they hold might otherwise be held by citizens or legal immigrants. The public service they use impose burdens on our taxpayers.
So there was always a strong white working class vibe to the Democrat Party, but somewhere during the Obama, probably the second administration, I'd say, he let in a lot of very radical Black Lives Matter, feminist, identity politics people, and they basically made it known that people like me were not welcome. So at the same time, you had Trump come along.
Warren, she seems to have made it her job.
Who, Pocahontas? Pocahontas? Well, no, she's, look, she is
very offensive.
You tell me. Oh, really? Oh, I'm sorry about that. Pocahontas? Is that what you said?
And Trump was just a perfect storm with the alt-right, where a lot of people who hadn't been able to stand up for themselves, white people, men, Christians, etc., were finally finding their voice. And then Trump was really unapologetic, not necessarily in advocating for white people or anything like that, but he was like an old school guy who was not afraid to be who he was and not afraid of stepping on eggshells to protect the politically correct types.
There's a guy totally disruptive, throwing punches. We're not allowed to punch back anymore. I love the old days. You know what they used to do to guys like that when they were in a place like this? They'd be carried out on a stretcher, folks. That's true.
So I saw him as being somebody we needed for free speech and to make sure that everybody is treated fairly, including white people. I started my website, which was originally jasonkessler.net. Now it's jasonkessler.us, and I don't remember when I started. It was probably in late 2015, early 2016 or something like that. And originally it wasn't political at all. It was only an outlet for my creative writing because, a lot of people might not know this, but I went to film school originally before I ended up graduating with a degree in psychology. I've written a novel. I've written a book of poetry. I've written like a short story crime anthology. I've done a lot of writing like that, so it was sort of a short showcase for me to be able to put my creative writing out there. But over time I started to get more and more political, and then when I started to come across the Wes Bellamy story and the anti-white tweets that I feel were his motivation for trying to take down Charlottesville's Robert E. Lee statue, that was the outlet for me to publish it, because I didn't think any mainstream news outlet would cover it.
Even one of Bellamy's tweets would have forced his resignation a week ago if he were a white man. Consider this tweet, which Bellamy wrote just a few years ago while employed as a teacher in Albemarle County school system. LOL, The funniest thing about being down south is seeing the look on the faces of little white men when they have to look up to a black man.
And that took off, and it was covered by the Washington Post and all these other news outlets.
For all of you who have missed it, this is black supremacist Wes Bellamy. This is the vice mayor of Charlottesville. He said white women are the devil. He said it ain't rape if she moans. He said he tunes out white people in community meetings. He said his favorite thing about being down south is seeing the look on the faces of little white men when they have to look up to a black man. This is a black supremacist.
Jason Kessler's on line 3. Jason, you're on with Wes Bellamy. Go right ahead.
Rob.
We don't have a whole lot of time. Go ahead.
Yes, I've never had Wes Bellamy ever have a conversation with me before. Wes, in the past, you have said that you're not just going after Robert E. Lee. I mean, before your racist anti-white tweets were exposed, you said we need to take a look at Thomas Jefferson and Monticello next. Do you still feel that way? Do you feel like Thomas Jefferson should be torn down since he was a slave owner?
Well, one, I've never said that we should tear down the statue.
You said
of
we
Robert
should take another look at
me
Monticello. What do you mean by that?
All right, let's let him respond so we don't run out of time. I think it's a good question.
Yeah, so one, I've never said that we want to tear down anything. I don't believe that we need to tear down the statue of Robert E. Lee. I believe that it needs to be moved into a different place so that it can be respected in the proper way, not in the middle of our city. So if that means it goes into a Civil War park, or whether that means it goes to a museum or something of that nature, I don't want to desecrate the statue in any shape, form, or fashion.
So after that, it just didn't make sense for my website to continue to be creative writing, and I just started doing politics all the time.
Right. Okay. So your writings before all this, they didn't touch upon politics or race or anything like that?
A little bit on politics, you know, I mean, but for the most part, it was apolitical.
Okay.
Wow, that's a weird thing. It's almost like fire hitting a pile of gunpowder or something, because I was just, doing my thing. I went to UVA in Charlottesville. My family lives there, and I remember I was picking up a few jobs off of Craigslist, just doing gigs, and I ended up going to this guy's house, and he had all this stuff he needed moved out of his backyard. And at the time, I was already starting to transition towards conservative politics, becoming more of a alt-right guy. And this guy is a conservative who'd been going to the Charlottesville City Council meetings for a long time, and he'd been pretty much the only voice pushing back against the left-wing critics, saying that black people were being unfairly targeted by the police in the city, and they needed reparations and all this other stuff.
I'd like to end with a quote from Thomas Jefferson.
Can we let him finish? No, we can't. Yes, we have to.
So he was kind of providing a counterbalance to that. And I remember him telling me about Wes Bellamy and the fact that he was trying to tear down the Robert E. Lee statue, and that he hadn't run on that issue at all during the election. It had just been something that he'd sprung on the voters after getting elected. And then I started noticing a lot of other people talking about it, and I thought, man, this is a really shitty situation, because as liberal as Charlottesville is, there's no way they would have voted to take down that statue. So this guy got in like a Trojan horse and started pushing this radical left-wing identity politic agenda.
As such, whereas City Council voted on February 6, 2017 to remove the statue of Robert E. Lee from the park currently known as Lee Park and to change the name of the park, and whereas City Council instructed staff to analyze options to carry out this decision.
And when I looked into the guy, I thought, man, there's got to be some thinking which underpins this, like anti-white thinking. So I went on his Twitter, and it was stuff that the media should have covered in the first place when he was running for office. And I just used key term searches that were like black, white, whatever, and like there was just, you type in white and it was like all this stuff. Like, I hate seeing white people around town. My favorite thing about being down south is seeing the faces of little white men when they have to look up to a black man. He said, it ain't rape if she moans, talking about like a woman when she's asleep, and like just crazy stuff that a white man or just a man generally would have been fired for or removed from office so quick their head would spin. And so when I published that stuff, the Republicans in the Virginia House of Representatives made sure he was taken off for the Virginia Board of Education. That's important because he's exactly the kind of person that is making the kids ashamed to be Americans, to feel like everything white people ever did was like Hitler and slavery, and that's it. You know, and you know, serving a political agenda of indoctrination for kids. But he didn't get hardly any criticism from the Charlottesville City Council. They let him slide, and that's when I realized that this thing was going to be more of a, you know, a psychological war in a way, because, you know, I figured that if you just show the public the anti-white bias and say, well, why, if this is not okay to do to black people or any other group, why can you do that towards white people? And show that the agenda behind taking down these statues and revising American history is not about anti-hate or whatever, or anti-racism. It's really a different kind of racism.
When you're talking about Wes's comments, the comments he made, he is a man who grew up in the South, who has suffered from the legacy of slavery. And for people, including you, Mike Signer, to call his comments troubling, like you were never a man and never 23 and never insulted anybody, is very concerning.
There's a video that's out there showing the first city council meeting after I exposed those tweets by Wes Bellamy. Now, if it was a white person who'd been caught saying, like he said, white women are the devil. So let's say there was a white city councilor somewhere that said black women are the devil. He would be like ducking his head while the media is hounding the guy, and he would realize this isn't working, I gotta quit, you know? But Wes Bellamy came into the chamber like he was Vince McMahon or something, and the whole crowd would, woo, yeah! Like, they love the fact that people are hateful towards white people, and there's really no justice for white people or equal treatment in Charlottesville. And I think that that's been borne out all through Unite the Right, and the way that only one side has been prosecuted, where the alt-right side has been like brutally prosecuted and people are being sent away for like 8 or 10 years. And then you have people on the other side who were like using flamethrowers against people and smashing middle-aged men across the face with mag lights, and they're not being punished for their crimes. People in Charlottesville are very, very sick. There was a white lady named Kristen Zakos who was on the Charlottesville City Council for a while before, I guess, Mike Signer and before Wes Bellamy, and she was far left, like self-hating white person.
We need to recognize that there's still racism in our community, and we need to work to root it out.
She's the kind of liberal that's like really over-the-top virtue signaling.
Mr. Fogel, you want to be taken out.
So a white man can shut down a black man who's trying to give an explanation. Is that what this is about?
All right.
That's what I hear every time person you interrupted up here.
I think she adopted the 3 African babies as she was pushing to have the Confederate statues torn down.
Sure. Well, it's something that I first brought up in 2012, publicly. I had discussed it with other folks over the years, but as you said, it really, both of those large statues really are sort of a celebration of the Confederacy, and it seemed to me that Charlottesville in the 21st century is not a place that celebrates the Confederacy.
And she could never really get any traction because they're all like, white lady, why are you so, aggressive and trying to hate your own people? No one cares. None of the black people in town actually want the statue removed, so we don't care either. And then she found this Wes Bellamy guy who He went to this all-black university, had these incredibly anti-white views, and was sort of like a thug, street-type person with a little bit of an education. And I think she saw that as an opportunity to mold this person, and he became her protege. And over time, you can see from the time he first ran for city council in a failed attempt, and he was still putting out a lot of these anti-white tweets.
And I'm not the same dude that wrote those tweets a long time ago. I've grown up a lot.
And like glorifying rape and all this stuff that liberals would have a very hard time with now. That stuff toned down, and he started funneling his resentment towards white people into policy proposals like affirmative action, support for reparation, tearing down the monuments. So West Bellamy was the next evolution of the, you know, radical racialism of the Charlottesville City Council. Then there was a activist named Nakuya, who I guess in some ways is more radical than West Bellamy.
Mike, you need to leave. You just showed us how weak you are. You just showed us.
I wouldn't say she's quite as bad as him, though, to be honest. But her campaign slogan was unmasking the illusion. So what that meant is like the illusion that Charlottesville has moved on from racism and white supremacy, and really it's just an illusion that she's going to rip the mask away and show you all the bigotry and white supremacy in the community.
You know, what I want everyone else in the world to just be aware of is that what you said during your intro, that the deep-seated racism has been a major problem and still remains a problem in Charlottesville.
So she was an independent candidate, but she was backed by a number of these Democrats. And after the rally especially, I think it helped push her into office. She is a literal communist, just like a lot of her supporters are. She was out in the streets protesting Unite the Right with all the other activists.
We're here to maintain order between the groups, but your group is the only group that's left.
What's that?
Why your group is the only group that's here? How are you what are you maintaining order of?
We were trying to go get a person that had been circled in by protesters.
But that's over now. Why don't you go home?
We were trying to.
So you can't leave now? Who said you can't leave?
We stopped here once that lady fell off the curb and hit her head.
Okay, so now you're ready to leave.
And so now you have a situation where Charlottesville, which a short time ago was overwhelmingly white, is seeing the demographics shift. It's still majority white, but yeah, what is the representation on the city council? You don't have a single white man on the Charlottesville City Council. What you have is former Mayor Mike Signer, who is now just a normal city councilor, and he's Jewish. You have Mayor Nakuya Walker, who is black. You have West Bellamy, who is black, and then you have two liberal white women. So no white men. And not a single Charlottesville City Council meeting goes by where people aren't blaming their problems on white men. It's just an impossible environment to get elected.
Often, institutional racism, to me, looks like following the rules when it works out for the bad guy.
The dialogue on race, funded by the city, points out clearly that the white population has a huge advantage or privilege over our people of color.
The organizers of August 12th's Unite the Right rally and local white nationalists want you to believe that their rally is about freedom of speech. They will argue that rescinding the permit for the 12th is a blow against free speech, the First Amendment, and against the ideals that this country supposedly stands for. They would have you believe that speech of any kind, even hate speech, should not only be protected by the First Amendment, but given a platform.
The last thing I want to say is I apologize to Ms. Hill for some of the ugliness that's just been said.
Okay.
It's completely inappropriate.
Thank you. One of the things that you just did was exactly what we've seen essentially these white supremacists and racists do for decades. When you are attacking, and some will agree and some will not agree, but I personally believe that there's a duty here Because I'm not just going to let you just talk to her crazy like that.
I mean, there's no rule of law. The protesters can get up and scream and march on desks. If you're a conservative, they'll keep you strict to 3-minute timeline, and people will scream over you through the majority of the time.
Are we going to do this every two words?
Man, just talk.
But if you are like an NAACP, Black Lives Matter person, they're terrified to put any limits on them. So they'll go over their 3 minutes and keep talking, and you know, if anybody tries to tell them they got to stop, they'll just start screaming more until they get their way.
I heard some true things that pained me to listen to hear about the city. I mean, I gave a lot of my life trying to make this place a better place, and I know, believe it or not, these guys have put time into it too. In order for us to get beyond this, in order to get justice, all of us have to work together. We are all on the same side. We're going to get justice.
Wes Bellamy got up during one of the meetings and did a Black Power salute.
That equality of the law is based on the rights to share public spaces with everyone else. Some may opine, stating Confederate symbolism is racist. That Confederate symbolism supports a racist or supremacist ideology, marginalizing African Americans. Well, who
Thank
is
you, Mr.
saying
Lucas.
that? These people.
Thank you. You're done. Ms. Parker?
There was a conservative, middle-of-the-road type guy who tried to come and say, hey, maybe we should have compromise on these statues, you know, maybe we could keep them up but have a plaque contextualizing or whatever. So he was wearing a baseball cap. He left it behind, and after it was over, Wes Bellamy said, hey, you left your hat. Why don't you come and get it and take that compromise with you?
I praise Mayor Signer because he used the phrase add and don't subtract. Add to the parks, don't subtract. Now, I thought that was the smartest thing I've heard the whole time about this issue. There's room for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next. That's.
Hey, you left your hat, and when you get your hat, take that compromise with you. See you later.
Mr. Bellamy. Mr. Bellamy.
So they're completely disrespectful of anybody with an opposing view.
All right. Colleagues, I would like to cancel this meeting. Colleagues, Ms. Akos, Ms. Galvin, Mr. Bellamy, Ms. Fenrick, I would like to cancel this meeting.
It's completely unprofessional, but there's a level of tyranny that's been brought to bear in that community, and what was once a liberal community, which I think was traditional liberal, which valued free speech and diversity of opinion, in keeping with Thomas Jefferson and his university, UVA, I think it has ironically been subverted by that university, where you've had radical communist totalitarians who have no respect for free speech, who have no respect for rule of law, who want to abolish the police, who want to abolish ICE and the government itself. They've taken hold. Yeah, there are all kinds of things that go on at those meetings that people don't see.
You guys are lucky enough to be the only city council that this city has actually went to hell on. I mean, I'm being honest with you. You have groups sitting back here talking about Black Lives Matter and everything else, and they have been evil, they have been nasty. Now, I don't agree with hate groups at all. I don't care if it's the far right or the far left. Last time I was here, I got cussed out by a couple of them going out the door. I was accosted by some of them out when y'all took break. You're generating an atmosphere of hate and intolerance. You can't sit there and ask for equality and you don't give it yourself. You, Mr. Mayor, are the figurehead of Charlottesville. To come out and speak against one hate group and not all of them is wrong. Hate is hate, regardless of which way you go. We live in America, Well, you have a right to think and feel the way you want. I mean, that's the Constitution. We have bigger and better fish to fry than to worry about a statue. Charlottesville has never been like this. Right. Never. And many of you haven't even been here long enough to really know what Charlottesville is like.